afternoon, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your lunch. Welcome back. I can tell you that those of you that were in our morning session, I have sent Sabella, who's in charge of everything, to the information promised on the SROs. I have the stuff from the federal government. I have a sample MOU, and I also have a sample evaluation tool. So again, these are all best practices that protect the SRO and keep their function, as well as helps with guiding schools so that they know how to use SROs. So without further ado, I'm going to start us off this afternoon with Dr. Tim Murphy. Dr. Murphy is a perfect example of why this meeting, this conference, should be face-to-face. I first heard Dr. Murphy speak 2 years ago. He spoke for almost 2 hours at our conference, and everyone said the same thing. It wasn't enough time. Dr. Murphy is a psychologist, former senator, former congressman. He is awesome. And without further ado, Dr. Murphy, I am ready to learn. It seems like Dr. Murphy he's on, but because he put up his slides, but he is not giving a sound. While we're waiting for him to adjust that, I do want to remind everyone on the left-hand side of your screen, there are a series of icons. There's a camera, a microphone, exit, how many participants, but about the 5th button down on your left, there is a balloon with a question mark. And that's where you ask your questions. So please have that ready to go. And Dr. Murphy, I don't see your icon yet. I'm not sure if you can hear. Sabella, have you turned on his microphone?
Be turned on, yes. There you go. Is my camera on? I'm sorry, everybody, for this. It was all set up, and I hope people can now hear me as I'm speaking. It's great to be with you. I don't know where you are in America. I'm here in beautiful Pittsburgh, home of our undefeated Steelers and chilly weather. But I want to talk to you about a very important topic here with regard to school safety from a different perspective. I'm going to talk in terms of the psychology and mental health of aspects, but really adapt it now to what's taking place in the era of COVID. This illness has changed everything in how we view schools and what we're dealing with in mental health. It is this year wasn't really great with regard to how things are looking for us. That cartoon, if 2020 was a game, you can see it being punched in the gut, and that's how a lot of us feel. And we end up on our knees hoping and praying it'll end soon. But nonetheless, this is the conditions we have. This is what we have to deal with. And I'm going to talk about what happens to us as this is proceeding on. So look what the pandemic has done. It has created a number of outside stresses in lifestyle. Schools have closed down. Work, some people haven't worked at all. Some people haven't worked for months, or it's virtual jobs. They're going back and forth. Restaurants open, close, some closing forever. Across America, we're hearing news that many cities and states are going to shut down once again. Social and entertainment, movie theaters are what they used to be, although it's great if you own stock in Netflix or Amazon, but for the rest, it's been a problem. Socially, what's going to be happening with family gatherings, entertainment, gathering places, parks, anywhere else? It's difficult. Getting out and remaining fit is difficult at fitness centers. Houses of worship, where the very place we need to be sometimes during this prolonged stress are the places that are shut down, and even rules coming out that something as huge as St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York, which can hold thousands, is going to allow just a few people there. And of course, families can't talk to each other, see each other. Travel is limited. These are things which we have not seen before in our country, and things that are incredibly problematic for us as we move forward. What it has done also is given us informational stresses. We get contradictory information. Is this where did this pandemic start? Is it part of a conspiracy somewhere? Is a global threat? Are we seeing numbers go up and go down? Who gets sick? How they get sick? And so we find that as information is evolving on this, one of the factors that's come through with COVID is just tremendous mistrust. I mean, look at what the media has done in terms of fears and hospital, morgue, et cetera. Do we have enough hospital beds? Do we have enough equipment? What has happened? And then you have the whole election year multiplier. This election year, billions of dollars have been spent to influence people's opinion. And much of political opinion is based upon fear mongering, let's face it. And so what we have here is commercials talking about, are we safe? Are we not safe? We're going to get our jobs back. And all of these things have had a huge impact upon anxiety, mental health, and mental illness. There's also, on the other hand, some hopefulness. The recent news that has come out in the last week about one vaccine that has a 90% effectiveness, another one with a 90.45% effectiveness, pretty good numbers, but now we're waiting for the distribution. We're hoping that will go on. The other information that is the other thing with information stresses has been the mandated loss of our social support. We don't have that kind of give and take of information of people just sitting around and chatting and be supportive of each other. So it's the external restrictions taking place, but even to not just do virtual, but those casual conversations we've had to be supportive of each other and information has been there. And of course, it's been on a global level. So what happens in the human stress reaction? Let's go over this. This is going to be really important to understand what's taking place for children and adults. You've heard before the fight, flight, or freeze response. We get information that comes in through our senses, eyes, ears, nose, mouth, touch, whatever, and we have a reaction to that. Heat, extreme heat, we pull away. Something we see that's frightening, a car coming at us with high speed, or a bear chasing us, we jump away. A loud sound, a banging sound, a siren, all create a reaction to us. Now, very few of these are really instinctive. Basically, falling and loud noises are the ones that babies are born with. But over time and learning, we have other reactions to these things, and we learn to fight, or flight, or to freeze. Now, we also have two other things which make us as uniquely human. One is anxiety about the past and worry about the future. Fear exists in the present if we see a threat coming at us at a time, and we will fight, flight, or freeze. The anxiety, I'm using this as a term here to talk about replaying thoughts of the past. That videotape replay we do over and over and over about a problematic event, which can create the same physiological reaction as if we were seeing the event. We can also anticipate, I'm going to call it worry here, the future, and create a physical reaction as well for something that hasn't even occurred. We may fear it's going to occur, we may think it's going to happen again, but that will happen. Now, what actually happens to the brain is extremely important here. So I'm going to go over a couple little anatomy lesson things that's important. The prefrontal cortex and the front of your brain is the part that's our personality. It's our problem solving. It's our executive function. It helps us focus our attention. When everything's working right in the prefrontal cortex, we're in pretty good shape. Now, if we're strained or stressed or problems with alertness or damage there, that's not going to work as well. And under stress, it's not going to work as well. Because here's what else happens. The hippocampus, little section in the center of the brain, hippocampus means seahorse. It doesn't really look like a seahorse to me. It actually looks like a bent piece of shrimp. But the hippocampus is the part of the brain that is with our memory, our emotional memory, our spatial memory. You know, if you can't remember where your car is in the parking lot, and you have trouble remembering how you got here or how driving home, that's your hippocampus not working so well. But the emotional memory is also important because this processes a lot of the emotion and reactions. And at nighttime, when we're asleep, think of it as the cleaning staff is in there setting the house straight. So even when we're asleep, the hippocampus is processing memories, shifting things on long-term and also short-term memory, help us work through these things. The insular cortex. This is another part of the brain that, because of people, particularly those with stress responses, PTSD, dealing with exaggerated responses to pain and addiction. A lot of this is located because of the insular cortex, insular meaning island. And it's a small part of the brain, separating the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe. And this part assigns meaning to pain and temperature and inflammation and sensual touch. So that when we're having all these responses to what's going on with threats, it's the insular cortex trying to make sense of them. Then comes the amygdala. Now, this is really our fear center of the brain. This is about the size of an almond, maybe an almond in a shell. But this part of the brain can throw us off completely. There's also a little stripe on the amygdala, which is where anxiety comes from. And there's a lot more complexity to that, but let's say most of it is there. And so when we have a smell that may trigger us to have an immediate reaction, because that smell may be a burning tire or smoke or the smell of blood or diesel fuel, that for a soldier sets off bad memories of something that happened in Afghanistan, or soft smelling a gunpowder again, or the sound of a gun. The amygdala gets an immediate reaction to those and sends a response through the rest of the body and brain to say, we have to respond. It's very quick. And it's linked to some of the glands that are also going to send off this response, which we'll get to in a minute. The singular cortex, I wanted to mention that too, because that is one where this has connections to the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus and the amygdala. And this helps us regulate our thinking as we go through experiences. So when we're evaluating a situation, where we're coming up with our emotional reactions, it's the part that helps us influence control over the amygdala. Let's say you send out an impulsive text message to someone and they haven't responded back. And you start thinking, oh, are they mad at me? Is there something going wrong? What's happening? Did I offend them? That's your insular cortex trying to make sense of this whole thing and settle you down. But that's what happens. Now, let's look what happens with a stress response. Sight, sound, smell, taste, whatever. We're trying to process information. Here's what happens. The hypothalamus and other parts are sending out a reaction that this thing called a corticotropin-releasing hormone is sent out. That's going to ignite the pituitary gland, which is going to send out this other thing called adrenocorticotropic hormone, and that's going to trigger on the adrenal glands, on your kidneys, cortisol. Cortisol is one of the stress hormones, drugs in our body. That's going to set the whole body into action. It's going to mean it's going to change the blood flow. It's going to say you don't really need to be digesting food right now. You're going to have an effect upon adrenaline being released from the adrenal gland. The whole body is getting ready for this stress, this fight. And with all that, it may actually cloud the frontal lobe from even being able to think through clearly, because your body's got to have a reaction. This is a pretty primitive reaction, but we have to go into survival mode. Well, here's something else that takes place. Our body is also releasing these cytokine proteins. Some will inflame the brain, some will calm it down and not inflame the brain. You have less of these with aging and less of these with stress. Here's something that's real important. As these cytokines keep getting pumped out into the brain and the body, it actually can harm the brain. It can lead to increased incidence of anxiety, of depression. It could change the way we perceive pain. A person who's depressed and anxious, given the same pain as a person who's not, a person who's calm, one may rate pain as 4, another one may rate it as an 8. So think of what's happening here with these cytokines as it continues to go through the system, because our body is reacting to this. Well, what happens is the brain architecture can change. A single major traumatic event can have an impact where about 70% of the population sometime in their lifetime will face a traumatic event. Traumatic event meaning it's a life or limb threat to you, someone close to you. You can witness it or experience yourself. And we now know also that it could be, you can hear about this from someone else, a very traumatic event that could occur. So someone may not be present at a school that had a shooting. Someone may not be present at a factory that had a major explosion and caused harm to many people, but they may know the people there. They may have loved ones involved, and it can have that same kind of impact. So here's what happens short term. You prepare for the battle, for the fight or flight. But long term, lots of trauma and lots of stress, because stress can create changes in the brain similar to trauma. It shrinks your hippocampus. So think about that. Shrinking the hippocampus changes the way our brain is going to be able to process emotional memory. The amygdala can actually go through hypertrophy. It can get bigger. Now again, remember I said it was about the size of an almond and a little strip on there is anxiety? Sometime take an almond, put it on the floor and stand next to it and say, wow, this little thing is controlling the rest of me. And I use that sometimes when I'm working in therapy with people to help them understand we need to get back in control of this. But the amygdala can actually grow. And what happens is the signals going from the amygdala to the prefrontal cortex are not as strong. There's a saying in functional neurology which says neurons that fire together wire together. And literally we can see architectural changes where the hippocampus is shrinking, the amygdala is growing, microscopically, but it's growing. The connections between the hippocampus and the amygdala get stronger. The connections with the cortisol and the whole stress reaction get stronger. And the prefrontal cortex ability to say, time out, that's only a bang. That's a door slamming. That's not a gun. That's only the smell of something, but it's not the real thing. Our insular cortex ability to process that information and our prefrontal cortex ability to make these connections changes. And this inflammation, as it continues on with more depression and anxiety. And I propose this way to think of this as actually a type of damage. It's a type of traumatic brain injury, because over time, because the architecture changes, we have to understand when we have faced prolonged stress, maybe you're in a job that just is stress up to your eyeballs all the time, or you've lived through some very traumatic events, when you say, I'm having a hard time changing. Remember this from this message today. A lot of times we may think, wow, I'm not changing. Something must be wrong with me. I am harmed. I'm shamed. I'm dysfunctional. It really is your brain saying, we're here to protect you. And the anxiety and worry is keeping things going. So it's going to be tough to change this. And this is where the brain is really the only organ of the body capable of damaging itself through memory, through anxiety, and through worry, but can also heal itself. This is, by the way, with children who have a lot of chronic problems early on. There's something called complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and can have a much longer and deeper impact. On physical health, it's important to know that this cortisol, et cetera, can lead to weight gain. It can affect your diet. It can affect your sleep disturbances. Your perception of pain is exacerbated. So people who've been through trauma can react much lower levels of pain. As I said before, anxiety, depression, and people will seek to self-medicate through alcohol and drugs. On cognitive health, it can reduce our attention. If you notice someone who's had a traumatic event, or maybe ourselves, maybe it's soon afterwards, it's hard to pay attention. We could be misdiagnosed as having attention deficit disorder and giving children or adults medication for the attention disorder when it really is the trauma and neurological changes in the brain we need to be addressing. Memory can become a problem. I knew of someone from the shooting we had in the Tree of Life shooting here in Pittsburgh. And when I talked to him, he said the route he knew the synagogue to his home, he had driven it thousands of times. But that day he couldn't find his way home because our memory, our processing, remember what I said about the hippocampus and recalling location things, it became a problem for him. We get into brain fog. We can make bad and impulsive decisions. So people end up getting in a lot of trouble with things. And these thinking and mood influence each other because when we're feeling bad, we want to find ways to feel better. And here's what happens emotionally. We get a low frustration tolerance. We get moody, agitated, anxiety, PTSD, panic attacks, depression, and at worst, suicidal ideation when we start to say, I'm not thinking as well, and I just don't feel a hope. I got no one, I got nobody, I got nowhere I can go to. And so what happens is we end up with these personal conflicts in marriage, family, friends, and career. Then when you look at another overlay of the emotional impact of COVID-19, families already with financial stresses and unemployment, limited access to food, housing instability, forced relocation, all these have an impact upon students' mental well-being. There were increased instances of domestic violence, of child abuse, call to suicide hotlines have increased risk for substance abuse. Children who are now forced to stay home, where it's a traumatic home environment, are at higher risk for the declines in mental health. Now, there were some resilient factors for students as well. Psychologically resilient children who have at least one stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult are in much better shape to be safe. A study from the U.S. Secret Service, when they looked at factors that would predict common factors among those who are involved in crises and safety threats at schools, they found commonality between them. They did not have a stable and committed relationship with a supportive adult. Now think about what this is going to mean. We're not seeing these children at school, or if we see them online. Many children have increased absences, and we'll get to that, what that problem is. When children have a stable home life, a supportive, optimistic, they're good at problem solving, that's good, they have good nutrition, the family's academically supportive, the family spends regular time together, those are all resilient factors. But what's happened here with schools and learning, two things, the impact upon learning and the impact upon learning platforms. The impact upon learning is a lot of education has been lost. During the summer break, you see attendance, you see over summer break normally 20 to 50% of learning from the previous school year is lost over the summer break. Now, students who have had no learning from March to September, they've just been out of school, it is even worse. Absentee rates remained a problem. I think it was the Philadelphia schools as well as other ones. Absentee rates may have been high as 50% once they went online. Rural areas that don't have good broadband services, or they send paper pencil things at home and the parents themselves are not learning or good teachers for them, you end up with serious difficulties. And when you have poor achievement, absenteeism, and retention risk, you should ask in your local school district, how many days does a student have to miss before they're told don't come back, or you have to repeat a grade. But when you have these things combined together, the dropout rate jumps to 250%. And with that dropout rate comes a whole host of other economic, social, and problems. So the different learning platforms, just to say here, you have some students traditional classes at school, some totally from home, some go back and forth as schools get healthy, some have a hybrid model where half the school's home, half the school is at school. They split the week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, between some students. Some will split the day, morning and afternoon. It's kind of chaotic, and what happens is we don't know the impact of this has on learning. Nobody that I know of is doing pre and post tests. Let's test all the kids in September. Let's see how this goes. But we don't have that opportunity. What's also is when kids have a paperwork at home or online learning that could be synchronous, everybody's learning the same thing, or asynchronous, you get on when you can. If there's students without computers or families really may not have the same ability to monitor. Some families have the money where they can pay for tutors, but we're seeing the gap between those with learning opportunities and those without widening. This is going to have long-term impact. There's also the social isolation that comes from quality of home life. If there's prior history of problems, there's a dysfunctional home life, if there's problems with domestic violence and nutritional issues, if children remain in a vulnerable home environment, will continue to have problems. And for example, children exposed to depressed mothers before age 5 have higher risks later on for social, emotional, and physical health problems. So we expect this to exacerbate over time. The increase in mental health concerns is not to be overstated. I mean, there's increased reports of stress, depression, substance abuse, suicidal ideation. The majority of students assessed report acute stress, Mental Health America reported a staggering increase in COVID-linked depression and anxiety, with the highest rates among 11 to 17-year-olds. The CDC said there's a 63% increase between ages of 18 and 24-year-olds for depression, anxiety, substance abuse. Now, notice this. The risk for serious mental illness jumps during these ages. 50% of the cases for serious mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, serious depression, appear by age 14. 75% by ages 24. And what we're saying here is the stresses, which can be an exacerbating factor, triggering factor, is much worse for these populations. They are not at school. The people who are supposed to be monitoring them, teachers, physicians, nurses, bus drivers, all these people that normally could pick up on problems in kids, they're not there for much of the time. Plus, the access to mental health services is severely limited. As I said before, teachers, clergy, physicians, peers, they're not picking up on this. 10% of students get some kind of counseling. Half of those children get it at school, but they don't have that anymore. And we already have a nationwide shortage of psychologists and psychiatrists. And so many communities just don't have access to services. Now, we're able to do some online, but that's a struggle when a child's trying to talk to someone privately and mom or dad are right next to them or other kids are in the house playing. So what do we do in this country? We still treat severe mental illness through the police, through jails. Maybe they can get to a provider. But what we have is kids who have the biggest risk. We're maintaining the risk factors. We don't have the monitoring factors, and we're not providing help. So when it comes to school safety, we have to understand bullying continues. Maybe the physical fights are not the same, but there's other things that we can expect to occur if people feel a great deal of stress, increase in auto accidents, suicide rates, individual homicides and group homicides, that even though we haven't seen some of these big events yet, what I'm saying is my concern is with all these extra stress and the problems, be aware and be ready. Let me talk about one quick thing with the angry child. Now, I wrote about this in a book called, I wrote the book called The Angry Child, Regaining Control When Your Child is Out of Control. I just want to mention these 10 factors, which I go into there in the book. Angry children are makers of their own misery. They create problems wherever they go. They have difficult time with problem analysis. Remember what I said about the frontal cortex and being able to analyze and solve problems. Think about also another characteristic. They tend to blame other people for their problems. They have a hard time understanding their own responsibility. If they have a negative emotion like sadness or depression or worry, they can turn that into anger, and they will lack empathy for how other people may feel. They'll attack people and not the problem. They'll use anger to gain power, thinking, well, I may not be able to change everybody, but if I can at least intimidate you through anger, I can keep you back and away from me. They'll also, in their own heads, keep this script going of destructive self-talk that maintaining thoughts like, these people are mean to me. I'm going to get them. I'm going to show them who's boss. Other people are out to get me. It's hard to calm them down with this unless you really work with them. They also confuse anger with self-esteem. Because I'm angry, I'm powerful. If I'm weak, I show more anger. This is where I get my esteem. But throughout all this, there's always a place to approach them because they can be nice when they need to be. Now, let me show you now in this remaining section here how we can build resilience and recovery for adults and children. I'm going to give you these points here: fitness, attitude, sleep, training, eating, and relaxation. Let's go through these and see if you can adapt them to your life and help other people have it too. Under fitness, physical fitness affects the brain. We need regular cardio and strength workouts and to maintain a healthy weight. You got to be doing this. That's one of the reasons why we see children who attend regular gym class do better academically than children who don't. When you stop it, you're going to have a decline in muscle strength, your endurance, your brain volume actually gets smaller, your efficiency of your brain functioning declines when you stop exercise. And we know that your genetic is actually affected by fitness. A study done of people running on a treadmill, they were looking at genetic markers of endurance in running. They told one group, you have more of this genetic marker, and the other group, you do not. That was randomly selected. The people who believed they had more of this could actually run farther, faster on the treadmill than the other ones who didn't. Then they went back and checked these genetic markers. And indeed, the group who believed they had it and did more improved because it released, think of this like turning on the DNA for those folks. By the way, with fitness, your stress level also goes down. You're burning off that cortisol and setting habit in a constant alert state for you. Cognitive decline over time is slowed. So if you're a person over 30 and you start thinking, I'm not thinking as well as I was when I was younger, stay in shape and keep your brain moving. And also, it disciplines the mind and body by staying involved and doing something on a routine basis. All those things are helpful. A lot of kids don't have that now. There's no online program for kids to stay fit, but this is very, very important. There's also the next thing of attitudes. We did fitness, now let's do attitude. By the way, this word fails. The acronym is FASTER. Fitness, attitude. Attitude health is those thoughts and feelings and behaviors we connect. It is the inspirational phrase that we have. It's the what determines our reaction towards people, places, events, and things. Attitudes are learned through experience, good experience and bad experience. Judgment comes from that too, and they can be very helpful or very toxic. They can be optimistic and hopeful, or be pessimistic and despairing. Attitudes can change with determined work, with practice, and trauma, shock, and stress can move them on the decline. So this group that needs help, who has a hard time getting help, who doesn't have exposure to that, one of the really important things we can do to help build their resilience to stress, help them as resist stress as it's happening, recover from stress, it's the attitudes. So next is health, fitness, attitude, sleep. Fitness, attitude, sleep. Contrary to some people thinking I can get by with 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, well, studies say you really can't. You may do that in bursts, but patterns of sleep, we generally need 7 to 9 hours. High school kids actually need more, like preschool kids. We have difficulties with people who have shifts. We have difficulties with people who have to get up early in the morning and stay up late. And what we see with traumatic stress is sleep disorder come up more. Poor sleep patterns with late onset sleep, frequent night waking or early awakening, it impacts how well our brain functions. This is something important to know about the brain. So as our cells are using up energy and it excretes the waste products from the cells of that energy and that goes out through our kidneys, the brain operates a little bit differently because the brain cells are not directly connected with the veins. So as brain cells burn and off goes their waste, it goes into the cerebral spinal fluid. Then there are cells that wrap around the veins in the brain, and what happens, that cerebral spinal fluid is connection during the day and under stress. Those cells have little gaps that close up, and at nighttime they open up. When you relax, they open up. When you meditate, they open up. And so the brain over time doesn't, if you're under a lot of stress or losing sleep, your brain isn't going through its cleaning cycle. Cognitive slowing can take place. Long term, you're not going to recover from sleep by sleeping on weekends. But sleep health can also be disruptive for children or children who experience a lot of stress and trauma. So I just want to put in here for sleep recommendations for everybody who's an adult out there. Don't waste sleep time. Get all you can when you can. Cut the caffeine. Watch out for supplements that are going to keep you awake, like caffeine supplements. Do a calming nighttime routine. Be in the dark, quiet. When you're tired at work, make sure you have other staff who are double checking with the others. If you're tired, am I doing this okay? Remind me, I haven't slept very well. Understand that brain healing and recovery, especially for people with trauma, are going to need a little more sleep recovery. Don't be a sleepless hero if you're a staff or you're a security and think I can get by in this, because you're going to make dumb decisions. And practice how you get to sleep quickly. Good sleep hygiene. Put away your computer, put away your cell phone. And use this technique too, by the way. When you should never make a decision when you're hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or somebody had hungry, angry, lonely, tired, or on bad drugs. Don't do that. Okay, the next thing has to do with training. And that is to keep your brain sharp. You want to keep your brain very active. When your brain is active, your brain cells, you're actually generating more with your neurogenerativity. That is, your brain is new cells and new connections occurring all the time by keeping yourself mentally active. Children in school who are practicing math and reading and art and all those things too are improving that. It continues through a childhood into adulthood. So even as adults, be involved in something. Keep learning, whatever that is. Keep learning. Languages, musical instruments, anything at all. Try that. And the epigenetics of this is important too, because you inherit some of the things from the next generation from keeping your brain sharp. It carries over to other parts of the brain, and this is why it's so important in dealing with stress. Because no matter what's happened to you, whatever the trauma and stress, do something else unrelated, something that's going to keep your brain sharp and active. And that will help you do better with other problem solving and managing stress. When you're dealing with teams, to help them also, to redirect them, to teach them, to challenge them, to motivate them, Again, this is one of the areas that's missing when you don't have kids in the classroom together. They're not learning to motivate each other. But one of the things we can do to overcome that is to make sure we're still teaching children problem-solving skills. Next item is eating healthy. Eating healthy is one where cutting out sugars, processed foods, keep the fats out. A great thing to remember, by the way, is the Mediterranean diet. That is, if you ever want to look that up, that's a simple thing you can do to pay attention. This is also a good brain healing diet. Also for children, the 3 healthy meals per day is what they need. This has strained a great deal for children who have received free and reduced lunches and didn't have as much. This is where community support is vital. One of the things that's so important for children from at-risk families, time of COVID, make sure they're eating right, to be checking in with parents, to make sure you're monitoring them for other issues related to symptoms of abuse and neglect, of conflict. Don't just look at those who are already on your radar screen, but be monitoring others. Because in the age of COVID, we're basically flying blind and trying to repair this plane at 30,000 feet. And it is difficult for us. When it comes to the next step, relaxation health, this bears a little bit of attention here too. So for children, play is the work of childhood. Play is the work of young childhood. Children will, through play, work out their problems. They'll reenact them through imaginary play, older children through artwork. It helps them process difficulties. And you can see there that the tuned clinician or the teacher can see the themes coming up in children's drawings or children's play, which is exhibiting their stress. So be watching there. Also in the social interactions, again, sometimes we're flying blind, but it's good when you can do this as a teacher, as security personnel, to be asking, or if you're on one of the threat assessment teams, to get some sense of how the children's social interactions are going, and face-to-face versus virtual. But here's some of the things that are important to teach. Make sure that families understand the value of meditation. Now, meditation is focusing attention, and you're shutting out the world. You have more self-awareness. You have some kind of a phrase that's calming or positive. And I think it's a great idea that even if virtual classes and information sent home to families, you're teaching them some of this. Now, look, I get it. Some families may not be as tuned in, may not understand, particularly a high-stress, volatile family. I don't think they do much meditation here. But we need to still teach children to take time out, to shut out the stimulus, turn off the computers, get rid of your cell phone, and think positive affirmational thoughts. Schools that do this really find kids are doing much better. The second thing is mindfulness. Mindfulness oftentimes gets confused with meditation. Mindfulness is where you're focusing out. You're actually fully aware of everything around you. The sounds as you walk down the street, the sights, the feeling of the sun, all those things you're fully aware. And you're welcoming those sensations in, saying, I'm not threatened by this. I want to be fully aware in the moment. But what I'm also going to be aware of is the anxiety about the past and worry about the future. I say, you know what, anxiety? You're not here now. You're in my thoughts, but I'm going to say, I'm not going to be with you right now. Worries about the future. I'm also going to block you out. You're not going to be here right now too. You want to be fully aware in the moment. This helps children and adults as we're trying to process difficulties. Remember what anxiety does. It sets off our whole stress reaction. Over time, it reduces the size of some parts of our brain and increases the size of others. It shuts off our frontal cortex from trying to process this. Mindfulness turns those things back on. And it says about anxiety, you're not going to control my life at the moment. I'm going to look at the facts of the moment. There is no threat right now. There is no bear chasing me right now. For police officers who oftentimes will say, I'm fine, I don't have any PTSD, and we see, well, you seem to have a lot of big gut there. And it ain't just from eating donuts, it's because they're not processing your stress. It's from all those sleepless nights, which contributes to weight gain. It's from the stress that contributes to weight gain and risk for chronic illness and acute illness. And be aware, too, that people are under a lot of stress and a traumatic history. And one of the things to be aware of, you're sensitive to trauma, is that the immune system is shutting down. It's shutting down. And in an era of COVID, we want to be more aware of that. Look at what we've done with a lot of the elderly. So you're going to be in nursing homes. You already have physical stresses. We're going to prevent your family from seeing you. I remember a case of a woman recently who was 80-some years old, cancer, had been married 50 years, and they would not let her husband into the hospice during her final hours. I'm thinking, what bureaucrat figured this out? She needed that comfort, and he needed that comfort too, because as she was in her final hours of life, at least for him to have that connection can help him. I don't know what happened to him, but I suspect his immune system crashed. That's why so many people who had been married for a long time, had long relationships, die soon after from the heartbreak and from the loss and their immune system shutting down. We have to protect children by helping to make sure that they become aware and mindful in the moment, and they can calm themselves with meditation and mindfulness. And watch out for any tendencies to isolate. And I use isolation here in terms of I'm blocking myself from being anywhere in the world. I'm just going to self-hibernate, not be involved anywhere. And I'm going to, alienation is more imposed. We have a lot of imposed alienations from governments, from schools, and the unpredictability of this. As the school's open one day, close the next. I've got the school district I live in is open Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. The school next door, 2 blocks from my house, that's shut down. We have some school districts where I live that are totally open, some are totally closed. It changes back to back. This kind of alienation imposed upon children can have really devastating effects. So we have to watch out for that as it goes through. So in summary, understand this. Stress impacts the brain. And please understand this. If you are feeling a lot of this, and you've had some trauma, and you have prolonged stress, understand your brain has changed. And so if it's changed, of course it's going to affect your attention, your concentration, your emotional planning, your emotional processing. And I say this because in my work in the Navy at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center at Bethesda, or other work I've done there, and working with PTSD and traumatic brain injury, stress can impact the brain. I find when I'm working a lot with soldiers, sailors, airmen, marine, policemen, firemen, firefighters, EMTs, that it impacts the brain and it affects our thinking. And if we think it isn't, well, you're wrong. And that kind of convoluted thinking that says it's not going to affect me. Look, as I said, 70% of people experience some trauma. And a good percentage of them, 20%, may experience post-traumatic stress. And a percentage of them, maybe 8%, will experience post-traumatic stress disorder. But in all cases, as the brain is affected, it may be harder, but it's not impossible to change. And that's the message I always tell people. It may be difficult, but it's not because you're being punished by God. It's not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're not worthy. It's you've got to work on these things: fitness, attitude, sleep, training, eating, and relaxation to reprogram and change your brain. Otherwise, understand this: stress is going to affect your learning, your health, your emotions, and behavior. And in that context, you may find yourself making dumb emotional decisions, getting involved in dumb relationships, behavior of using drugs and alcohol and other screwball things we do, driving too fast down the road in your motorcycle, taking risks that you shouldn't be taking. All those are going to be more factors that you look back and say, wow, why did I do that? It's going to add to more stress and more problems. So that's why we need to be surrounded by supportive, helpful people to say, just hold on, let's relax, let's get you reoriented here, calm down. Understand the pandemic is an ongoing stressor. Every day when I see patients, it becomes part of our conversation that this is really getting to me. And now the latest thing is I wanted to see my family for Thanksgiving. We've had lots of plans, and now I'm being told we can't do it. When I see police officers who themselves feeling that media has turned against them, that these ideas to defund them or take money away from them or things like that, and they're already short-staffed and are already dealing with a host of problems. Teachers who learned a career of teaching and now are saying, wow, I've got to be a teacher and a health professional and all these things together, and they're not giving staff to help them. More stressors for them. Schools and families are going to be disrupted in this, and there is this whole need we have to really be more vigilant for those children, those teachers, those parents who are at the high risk. And you know what? We're all at high risk. So what we need to do is build resilience with fitness, positive attitudes, sound sleep, keep our brain sharp through training, healthy eating, and relaxation. And those are things that are going to help us go through this. This is how you can get hold of me if you need me in the future. The program I direct is called Fortis Future, where I focus a lot on veterans, military, and first responders. You can look at our website, fortisfuture.com. That's my email, and LinkedIn, just go to Tim Murphy, PhD. And Gary, if you're still there, I guess I left some time for questions so we can move forward with that.
Wow. Now, hopefully, you guys understand why when we have a face-to-face conference, Dr. Murphy speaks for a much longer time.
Yeah, and that's why I use my hands a lot too. Walk around.
I'm telling you, as a still active police officer, as a retired educator, I see and hear everything you're saying, and I'm thinking every teacher needs to hear this. Every parent needs to hear this. There's just so much phenomenal information. I've got a couple of questions that I think are really important.
Mm-hmm.
So this one here. So I was involved directly with 9/11, and then in 2005, the school I was assigned to had a horrific bus accident. I was the sixth deputy on the scene. Are there ways to reverse the trauma and stress that we've witnessed?
Yeah. Well, for the people who witnessed it and the people who may have been on the bus too, and the families of those people were there, they can all be affected with traumatic stress. And this was several years ago, or was it recent? Do you know?
2005.
2005. And here's what's important. Those links in our brains from traumatic issues of past, that's 15 years ago. But what happens is the brain through anxiety keeps processing over and over and over again. Think of this. If you see a meadow, and it's no path in it, but we walk through that meadow, the grass may be bent down, but in a week or two, it's going to grow back. If you keep walking through that meadow, eventually you're going to have a bigger path. And it may reach the point after hundreds of walks through it, you may still see that path years from now. If you ever look up online out west in places, the Oregon Trail in Wyoming or other places, you will actually see cut into the rock, the ruts from wagons. If you look, if you do a web search about the Appian Way in Rome, you will actually see the chariot tracks carved into the stones of the Appian Way from a couple thousand years ago. And that's what our brain does too. You keep rehearsing something, what fires together, wires together. What has to happen in these instances of traumatic event is we have to undo that process. And you do that by directly dealing with it. So when I work with people, it says, let's talk about the event that happens. Well, we're going to assign some new emotions to it. And we're going to keep stopping and say, that was then. This is now. It was horrific, but that was then, and this is now. And there's a few other things that have to happen too. By witnessing, sometimes we hold on to guilt or shame. I should have done something. I could have saved some lives. I could have protected somebody. I wish I could have done more. Or is this being done to punish me? We have to clear away that shame and guilt about things out of our control. We got enough to feel guilty about things within our control. And that comes also with dealings with some forgiveness. I didn't mention here, but faith is a big part of people's healing, a major part. Some 85% of people report that when they are seeing a counselor, that they are open to having faith, their faith discussed in this. But the number of psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors who discuss faith is very small, very small. People want it, but we're afraid of it. But I would hope that's some exploration too that could take place for someone like that. So rehearsing the event, but not in a negative way, but practicing and changing emotions and thoughts, looking at issues of guilt, forgiveness, and other strength within the person. There's a lot more to that. I'm giving you something that may take weeks to work on, but I know I've seen people change from this, even after years of trauma.
When my chief sent me to hostage negotiator school, shortly after he sent me to critical incident stress management course, he said, just in case it doesn't work out for you. And it was, and just as you were saying, how do we deal with that trauma that occurred, and how do we get through it so it doesn't negatively impact us? I got another question for you. I've got multiple questions. They keep coming in.
Okay.
Hopefully, everyone will get your information, but hopefully everyone has at least taken their camera and taken a screenshot of it so they have your information. Because one person says, where can they get a copy of your book?
Well, this book is called The Angry Child. You can go probably with Amazon or someplace like that, or Barnes and Noble. I have another book here, which is kind of related to a lot of dynamics I wrote, called Overcoming Passive Aggression. And I'm also so look at Tim Murphy and those. There's another Tim Murphy that writes other weird books, but mine's The Angry Child and Overcoming Passive Aggression. I'm also working on another book here, which specifically deals with trauma. Hope to have that done soon, so keep an eye out for that too. And if we have your names and email addresses as those things come out, I'll let you know too. But if someone has, just send me an email to that link, and I'll send you information about the books. And also link up with me on LinkedIn too, and I'll keep announcements going through that.
Great. You mentioned the closures of schools have an impact on stress and learning, and having the absentee rate goes up due to not having internet, rural areas, low income families, et cetera, with the pandemic in full swing. What do you recommend for schools and SROs on how to keep their students and themselves safe in this time of uncertainty?
Well, I think there's a benefit from doing your best to have the school open anyways. Part of the safety equipment that needs to be there is not just a plexiglass screen between desks or having masks on, but schools can also purchase some air sanitizing, air cleansing equipment, which can basically clean a classroom every 6 minutes. That's something that needs to be done. And there's process that could take place there because you want this school to be a healthy place. We know for many children who may not get good food at home, the school is their healthy place for food. The school may be the only place in a child's life during the day where they feel safe and secure for other reasons too. So I think it's very, very important for children to have that open as much as possible. And the other aspects too is to make sure that schools are identifying, particularly those who had problems in the past, that teachers are still connecting with that child somehow, finding extra ways to take time to meet with them, to help them. All very, very important for older kids, through emails, through connections, through calls. It's there. This is why I recommend schools also spend some time and money also to have teachers' aides to be checking with that. The social and counseling staff to be doing more there as well. If I had the money that we spent on political campaigns this year, we could do a lot for education. But that's
yeah. It's for educators. It's such a double-edged sword of, the educators live with somebody who is at a risk factor, but they want to be at school with their students because they know that's where they should be. But then they have that added burden of, am I going to bring something home to my own family? It's just horrible. I mean, it's lose-lose. I've got another question, and it kind of goes with the trauma that when you have a critical incident, and the words that my trainer often use when people would say, I must be going crazy because I think this way. And she would say over and over, that's a normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And people just needed to know it's normal. And this person wants to know, how do you stop your brain from racing and thinking about what happened yesterday and worrying about tomorrow?
This is an issue that's been literally around for a couple of thousand years. When I talk to someone who has a strong faith, I says, remember the quote says, you have enough to worry about today. Don't worry about yesterday or tomorrow. And it really becomes a process, what we call in the counseling world, thought stopping. So when I start talking when a patient or client starts talking to me about something, they say, stop, that's over. But I got to think of it, no, stop. But what if, no? And they can get annoyed with me, but basically I'm trying to teach them that is over. There's nothing you can do about it anymore. The only thing you have power over is what you're doing right now. It's like trying to digest the meal you ate a year ago. It's gone. But you can deal with the food on your plate. And by helping people redirect, it's a tremendously empowering aspect of this to help them as they go through these things. There is it's not an easy process. There's a lot to go with this. It is something that is the whole process of therapeutic approaches to help people learn to give up some of those things. But in the sense of resilience, some of the things that I teach people, I talk about the stages of resilience before the trauma, resistance during the trauma and stress, recovery afterwards, and then a stage of renewal in life. Is that in the resilience phase, my point is to help people build strength instead of weakness, self-discipline over being disorganized, being comfortable with solitude, being alone with your thoughts, good, bad, and ugly, but saying I can process these, I'm safe, and having some humility to deal with them too. Humility allows us to be honest with ourselves, to appreciate and be open to change. And a lot of people who are dealing with trauma, we've gotten pretty hard-headed and hard-nosed. I'm fine. I can take care of this. I might suck it up and I'll be fine. When I worked in the Navy, one of the things I did was I was involved with assessment and selection teams who worked with SEAL teams, the Navy SEALs. And as we would do all this extensive psychological tests and observations, I remember turning to the commander of one of the units. And I said, hey, what is it that you look for as a top trait in some of these SEAL support members? These are the people, maybe truck drivers, weapons specialists, dietitians, lawyers, whatever it is. He said, number one trait, that's easy, humility. Why? Because you humble people will be team members, will be supportive of each other, and will be honest about their strengths and weaknesses. I don't need anybody who's going to be a phony. Well, the same thing for ourselves too. Show me someone who is a military or veteran or first responder or teacher or anybody else who thinks, I got this, but they still are showing a lot of symptoms with problems in their relationships and divorces and whatever things they're doing. I'll show you someone who's still not humble enough with themselves saying, I need to get some help. So I guess that's the main thing too. I should say too that other things that are important to keep track of is a sense of hope. Even when we feel there is no hope, and when we're in the depths of despair, we feel there isn't much hope. I want people to at least understand the possibility of possibilities. That do you think there's at least a tiny bit out there, that some lighthouse out there that's marking the coast in the distance, that can still guide you towards improving? And getting people engaged in that, and then to feel that there is they can commit to being healed, to sense of healing and getting rid of their hurt, are part of what we have in terms of helping people move forward on all these things too. So a couple items there.
Dr. Murphy, that is all the questions we have right now, although I imagine that your Gmail account is now starting to fill up with people with questions. I just want to thank you again for being here. I look forward to your next book. I'm going to get The Angry Child. But again, thank you very much. It was, I know that you took things that I often tell people, explain it to me like I'm a second grader. And it was easy to, it was easy to understand what you were saying. And just thank you. In fact, someone just popped up on the questions. Thank you. Great information. So
great.
We appreciate your time. And it'd be nice because if we were in Las Vegas again, you would be getting a round of thundering applause and a standing ovation. So again, thank you.
Look, I'm at the stage of my life where all I want to do is help people. I pass it on. So if there's things I can do, if people have individual questions or need me to talk with their groups, please call me. We are the ones who are going to help prevent a lot of other tragedies, either of groups or in our own hearts and souls. And let's work on this together. I'm here for you. So please be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Murphy. And folks, let's take a break. We will be back at about 3 o'clock. So thank you very much. And again, Dr. Murphy, you are my hero.